A lot of people have asked me how I was able to immigrate to the US from Canada. Which visa, what are the visa requirements, how much does it cost, etc. And these are all questions that I had before I embarked on this long process. So this is the video that I wish existed back when I was going through the process of applying for my EB1 Visa and Green Card. This is my immigration journey, and obviously not legal advice.
Millions of every nation and calling, drawn together by their vision of America. Could these people of many nations become a part of the American way of life?
Also, this is going to take a while, so get comfy. I'm going to go do this from the couch because it's more comfortable there, so I'll see you over there. As you can see, my dog Vito's already pretty comfortable here. Obviously, consult a lawyer if you're actually going to do this, but this is just an overview of how my process went and the things that I had to do. So the visa that I applied for is called EB1, Extraordinary Ability. And the reason I applied for this visa versus some other visas that are available to you out there, depending on your situation, is because one, this visa grants me a green card, so permanent residency. It means I can work for any employer. It means I don't need a sponsor, an employer to sponsor me. And my wife and my family all get the same legal status as I do upon approval. According to the U.S. Customs and Immigration website, you must be able to demonstrate extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, business, athletics, through sustained national or international acclaim. You must meet at least 3 of the 10 criteria below or provide evidence of a one-time achievement like a Pulitzer, Oscar, an Olympic gold medal, or actually it just says Olympic medal. Long story short, there are 10 criteria, of which you need 3. Sounds easy enough, right? 3 out of 10. How many other tests in life require 30% as a passing grade? So what are the 10 criteria? Number 1, evidence of national or international award.
Evidence of your membership in associations in the field.
Evidence of published material about you in professional or major trade publications or other major media. Evidence that you have been asked to judge the work of others, either individually or on a panel. Evidence of your original scientific, scholarly, artistic, athletic, or business-related contributions of major significance to the field. Evidence of your authorship of scholarly articles in professional or major trade publications or other major media. Evidence that your work has been displayed at artistic exhibitions or showcases. Evidence of your performance of a leading or critical role for distinguished organizations. Evidence that you command a high salary in relation to others in the field.
And finally, evidence of your commercial success in the performing arts. So why did I think this visa was the best visa that applied to me? And the reason is because early in my career, I worked at an animation studio where I worked on a lot of animated shows for Disney, Nickelodeon, the BBC, other broadcasters around the world. And some of those shows went on to win awards like Daytime Emmys or Canada Screen Awards, Canadian Cinema Editor Awards, and a bunch of other lesser known awards around the world and in Canada. So my case would be built around connecting my work to those awards, as well as connecting the prestigiousness of the organizations and the companies that I did work for. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky, because if you're an editor, you know that like tying your work to the commercial success in the performing arts can be difficult, or that you had an original artistic contribution of major significance. Can be difficult to say the least. You really have to believe in yourself and in your work. I struggled with this one for a while because as I'm writing and collecting evidence about the different shows that I worked on, about my contributions, none of them felt like major enough. And I'm thinking back to like late nights working in an edit suite, looking for the appropriate fart sound effect to put into one of these shows. And, it's just like, well, was that a major contribution? It just really didn't feel important enough to qualify for this visa. I had to remind myself that this is not a judgment of my work. This is not an evaluation of the quality of my work. This really took some conviction, and it, as I was gathering evidence, it started to feel a little bit more organic, a little bit more like, okay, yes, I did contribute to this, because there are, DVD sales that happened. There was, TV ratings. There's a lot of money to be made off some of these shows. I didn't necessarily make a ton of money doing that, but, the work that I did led to commercial success, and that's sort of the important distinction.
Just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
So before I started the application process, before I really started doing all of the work that's required in evidence gathering, I independently consulted 2 different law firms to see whether or not I had a case. Both independently agreed that a case could be made that I satisfy at least 3 of these 10 requirements. I was referred to one lawyer who specializes in these EB1 type of cases with entertainers and comedians and writers and just people in the entertainment and arts industry. It worked for them. They got their visa and were now living in Los Angeles at the time. So I figured, okay, it worked for you guys. He did the work and got you guys there. He can probably get us there. He was confident. I was confident. So we started. The flat rate fee for our lawyer to prepare the application and file it was $5,000. Of the 10 criteria, I removed scholarly articles because obviously, not obviously, but like I hadn't written any scholarly articles. That one, I'm not in the academic field, I'm not in that world, so it was just not going to apply. So that leaves me with 9, of which I still just need to prove 3. But I wanted to keep all my options open, so obviously, we're gunning for 9 out of 9. And that's when the real work began.
I started to ask for reference letters from current and former colleagues, speaking to each of the categories. In most cases, I wrote the letters myself and cleared them with my lawyer before getting them signed, because the language of the letters needed to be pretty precise in reflecting what was in the criteria. So here's how my initial application broke down. 1. I presented a letter from a producer I worked with on a show that won a daytime Emmy, as well as a printout of the Emmys website where the show was listed as a winner, and a printout of the Emmys website about the nomination and selection process. Secondly, I became a member of the Canadian Cinema Editors and presented my member profile as well as a letter from a member vouching for my membership. For articles, I submitted articles from the New York Times and other papers and magazines, not about myself, but about the shows that I worked on. For number 4, my argument here was that in another job as a manager, I had to judge and evaluate the work of others. For number 5, I submitted a bunch of reference letters to show that my contributions to the show were original and significant. Number 6 was not applicable, so I skipped it. For number 7, I submitted reference letters speaking to my leadership role at a company I worked at after the studio. For number 8, this one was a stretch, but the argument here was that there is no show unless someone edits it, so my role as editor was critical. For number 9, salary, this was based on the job I had at the time of application, which technically was no longer as an editor. Finally, number 10, evidence of commercial success. I submitted online sales figures for projects and campaigns that I led, although not in a creative capacity. I submitted in late November of 2019 and paid $1,500 US for expedited processing. I definitely recommend this if you can, because this is the only time in the entire process that you will have a chance to move things along a little bit faster. 2
weeks later, we got an answer, but no, it was not the answer that we were hoping for. Instead of them just calling my name and saying, come on down, you're the next contestant on The Price is Right, or you're the next permanent resident of the United States, what we got was what's called a request for additional evidence, also known as an RFE.
You are receiving this notice because U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services requires additional evidence to process your form. The TLDR of the RFE is that reference letters alone were not enough, and I had to submit documentary evidence for what I submitted. The good news with the RFE is that they accepted my evidence of winning an award. So not only do I get a second chance, now I only need to prove 2 more to get approved. Your response must be received in this office by March 27th, 2020. And then this happened.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Both Canada and the United States will temporarily restrict all non-essential travel.
The league has been suspended.
Stunning isn't the right word, just crazy.
All this lockdown, coronavirus, self-isolation, self-quarantine, blah, blah, blah. I've been working on something that's sort of been taking me over a year now to do, which is our US visa application. So the deadline for me to have these documents in the hands of the US Immigration Service is Friday. So I have to FedEx or courier this entire package to them today. Alright, so that package has been sent, and now we just sit in prayer for the next 2 weeks, and hopefully we can get an answer. So our RFE evidence, our resubmitted evidence, looks like this. For memberships, I submitted the Canadian Cinema Editor's Bylaws, where it outlines what it takes to become a member. I submitted the section of the CCE website that talked about memberships, member profiles and IMDb pages of the people who get to decide who gets to become a member, and the mission statement of the organization. So for media, I resubmitted the articles, resubmitted the same letters, but this time I added the circulation data that showed that this publication was a major national publication that had a lot of eyeballs on it, whether in print or in digital. For judging, between the time of my original submission and the time I had to submit the RFE, I volunteered to become a juror at the Canadian Cinema Editors Annual Awards. So I submitted a letter from the person who was in charge of the jury selection, as well as some additional information about the Canadian Cinema Editor Awards, the different categories that I would be judging, and the types of people that are normally selected to judge these awards. For major contributions, this one was really hard, so I just had to dig a little bit deeper and just think about how we were doing things at the animation studio. Were there any unique techniques that we were kind of testing or trying out that would later become the standard for maybe not the industry, but at least that studio, or for a particular production that was had a unique thing about it. So I dug deep. I dug deep. I tried to think of some things. I submitted some reference letters about some different things that we were doing at the time. I don't know if they were major enough, but I submitted it anyway. I think that was probably my weakest one. For leading role in a distinguished organization, I submitted my job description for the job that I was working at the time, and then a bunch of information about the organization that I was working for. How long it's been around, how many people, the cultural and historic significance of that organization. For salary, I submitted my employment contract at the time, as well as a report from a talent agency that publishes an annual report on salaries for various roles in the creative field, showing that my salary relative to others, relative to the average, I should say, was a little bit higher. Lastly, commercial success. So this is where I found a bunch of TV reports, media reports. There was a Parrot Analytics website that gives you TV ratings and just different sort of raw data about the performance of television shows. So I printed off a bunch of that. So I printed off a bunch of that data comparing the shows that I worked on to other shows. I found various articles about, the success, the commercial success, the ratings success, whether on TV or DVD sales, about some of the shows that I worked on. And throughout this time, it was actually really, really cool to see that, because I was never privy to any of the sales data or the money side of things while I was working on these shows. So afterwards, now, years later, I'm seeing oh wow, this is really cool. It made a lot of money. A lot of people liked it. It was well received. It was a very popular show on Saturday mornings, for example. All these kind of things. So that's it. That's the 7 criteria that I was now applying for. Of which now, because the award was already approved, I only needed 2 more, and I'm golden.
On April 4th of 2020, just before midnight, while I was doing my favorite lockdown hobby of playing Call of Duty with friends, I checked my email on my phone between games and see this life-changing email.
despite the fact that we were in the middle of a global health crisis, we were all locked down and bored at home, I was feeling pretty great.
But we start with President Trump's announcement that he plans to temporarily suspend immigration into the U.S. He tweeted this news last night, citing the invisible enemy of the coronavirus and the need to protect jobs.
So, I mean, we weren't planning on making that crossing or making that actual move just yet, because obviously there's a lot going on. We just got approved, so there's a lot of affairs that we need to get in order, so to speak. But this worries me because I don't know what this executive order is going to be. I don't know. I don't know anything. I don't know how temporary this is going to be, if it's going to affect everything. I'm hoping this can at least, I'm hoping we can at least continue in the process that we're on. By the time you're watching this, you'll know what the outcome is. So, good. Hopefully, I'm just speaking to myself in the future and saying this wasn't really a setback, or, you know, eventually you made it there and you're posting this video. At the same time, I get this letter from immigration. Here, the approval of this visa petition does not itself grant any immigration status and does not guarantee that the alien will subsequently be found to be eligible for a visa for admission to the United States. Although this application or petition has been approved, USCIS and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security reserve the right to verify this information before and or after making a decision on your case so that we can ensure you have complied with applicable laws, rules, regulations, and other legal authorities. Basically, it says approved doesn't necessarily mean you're, approved. There's still more hoops to jump. There's still more fees to pay. Starting with filling out what's called a DS-260 online. Basically, a DS-260 is an online form asking for your work history, your travel history, all your different addresses that you may have had over a certain time period, all the different phone numbers you would have had during a time period, email addresses, social media accounts. And then you also have to submit a criminal background check, your birth certificate documents, if you're married, a marriage certificate, and then there's all kinds of other documentation depending on your situation that you might have to submit. At this point, you'll also need to specify a U.S. address where your green card and your social security number, all your documentation will be sent to. After all my birth certificate, my police check, and all my documents, after they were all approved, I was considered what they call documentarily qualified. And that was on August 24th, 2020. At that point, you are documentarily complete. You don't need to do anything else other than wait. So we waited.
At the time, we thought we were moving to New York very soon, so we even viewed some apartments on a trip to New York that summer.
Yeah, you have like a dining table area here, couch
or whatever,
TV. Yeah, this is great.
But every 30 days, we'd get an email saying, keep waiting. So we just kept waiting. We got a puppy, we bought a car, got pregnant, and kept waiting. Until finally in September 2022, we received notice that our interview had finally been scheduled.
I can't believe it's finally here. I gotta tell you how excited and frankly how relieved I am to finally be getting this letter. We've been in this process for what feels like an eternity, but it's actually been about 4 years and 2 years of just radio silence and waiting. So once your interview is scheduled, you'll have to do a medical exam, it consists of a chest x-ray and a doctor just validating your vaccinations. And all that for the low price of $350 per person. So after doing the medical exam and submitting the passport photos, we were getting ready to plan for our November fall road trip to Montreal. All right, here we go. Car's warming up. It's, what time is it? 8, 10 in the morning. And headed to our visa interview at the Montreal US consulate. I won't be able to bring any cell phone, not even my Apple Watch. Nothing electronic can really come into the consulate with me. So you guys are staying in the car, and I guess you'll see where we end up afterwards. Here we go. During the interview, they just asked me a little bit about my work, what I was planning to do in the US, where I was planning to live in the US, whether or not I had a job already lined up in the US. I think he asked me that incorrectly, because he asked me like if I had a job already in the US, and then he looked at my paperwork. He's like, oh yeah, you don't need to have a job already. So he kind of just moved off of that pretty quickly. But otherwise, the interview was pretty quick. They make you swear an oath that you're telling the whole truth, that everything is factual. Yeah, and then after reviewing all my documents, they said you're refused. The issue was with my birth certificate. So I was born in El Salvador, and I have 2 birth certificates. One looks like a very official looking document with the logo and like information on it. A lot of information about where I was born, time, parents, all this stuff. And the other one just looks like an old receipt that you just stuff into the bottom of your wallet and forget it was there. So I submitted the more official looking one online, had that one translated and certified, which cost about $100 by the way, because any non-English documents need to be translated to English by a certified translator. But I submitted the more official looking one, to me anyway, online. It was approved. So I didn't bother printing the translation for the other document. That turned out to be a fatal mistake for me. Because as the guy's looking at it, it's like, no, this birth certificate is from the hospital. I need one from the civil authority, so the town and whatnot, which is what the other one was. I just didn't print the translation and have it with me that day. I begged him. I said, listen, I can go and print it and have it to you like within an hour. He said, no, there's no way for you to get this document to us. He was really nice about it. He said, this isn't a no, doesn't mean you're not going to get it. It just means I can't, give it to you today. So what's going to happen is you're going to get an email with a bunch of other questions. You're going to fill those out, send those back, and then you're going to get some instructions on how to send us this document. And that one mistake cost me the visa on that day and made the whole trip to Montreal a complete waste. When you're refused, and it sounds very ominous, but refused doesn't mean denied. It just means that, for now it's a no. Your case is technically put into what's called administrative processing. Excuse me. So a week later, I shipped them the documentation that they had asked for. I submitted the questionnaire that they emailed us, which was literally just more detail about our travel history and our work history. And yeah, we sent that off to them. I got a new certified translation, which is another $100. And again, we waited.
And waited. We celebrated Christmas, welcomed our son into the world, signed a lease on a new apartment.
And of course, it was on day 181 that we get an email, not saying you're approved, simply saying, hey, send us your passport. Oh, and by the way, since it's been 6 months, we're going to need a new medical exam, $350 per person, and new passport photos sent to us. I mean, at this point, I was starting to lose patience and, didn't know whether even after sending them, it would be another 6 months after that. So we moved into our new apartment because our son was growing and just needed a little bit more space. 2 weeks into the 12-month lease, it's July 14th, and you can see my eyes are tearing up because I just checked the U.S. State Department's website to see the status of my case, which I've been doing literally like every half an hour for the last 3 weeks since we sent them our passports. And for the first time, the status changed from refused to issued.
2 weeks later, this came in the mail.
This is it. The moment of truth. Package came in today. I mean, there shouldn't really be any surprises. Okay. Do not open. To be opened by immigration officer. Must be presented at a port of entry. I guess that means we're going to be entering at a port. Okay, yeah, so this is part of the package they give you. I don't know what's in here, and I guess I'm not supposed to know, but that's when we actually make our crossing, we give that to them, and they'll know what to do with it. The infamous birth certificate, finally returned. Welcome to the United States of America. There's our thumbnail. Oh man.
That looked good.
I don't look great, but I mean, it's in there. That's all that matters. I mean, I guess this is where this part of the video stands. So essentially what happens is we get this, and now we can enter the United States. That kicks off the process to them actually mailing us the green card. And then that also, I believe, kicks off the process of getting a social security number. But there's an expiry date on here of December 1st, 2023. So this temporary thing that's in our passports will only be valid until December 1st, at which point, presumably, we should either have our green cards or we have to just wait for them in the States, which is a little bit earlier than we had maybe hoped or expected. So we got some planning to do to figure out the logistics of actually moving to the States. I mean, the expiration date that's shown in your passport, on your temporary green card, is the date by which that stamp in your passport must be validated. And you validate it by entering the United States with everybody on your application and this sealed envelope with all your documents that they give you. You're not to open that envelope. You're supposed to hand it to the Border Services person, and then they do whatever it is they need to do with it. Then from that date, from the day you do that, your temporary green card and your passport is valid for 1 year. Yeah, one of the big questions that I had before I made that border crossing was whether or not I was allowed to do that. Whether I could just cross the border to activate my green card and set off the application for my social security number, or whether I had to intend to move that day. But you can do it at an airport, or you can do it at a land border crossing. Even when we arrived at the border and we told them we were, doing this, we showed them our temporary green card, and the agent at the border said, "Are you just doing the paperwork today, or are you planning to move?" So we just said, "No, we're just doing the paperwork." He's like, "Okay, no problem, go ahead." And he directed us to the appropriate office to do the paperwork. It was super important for me to do it that way because of the sequence of events that needed to happen, because I was moving from Canada. I need to do that border crossing to get a social security number. I need the social security number to send to my job so I can start working. I need work to get an apartment. I need an apartment to get a bank account, and I need a bank account to receive the money from the work to pay for the apartment. So here it is, the culmination of nearly 5 years of work and waiting and process and bureaucracy. I finally had this card in my hands. United States of America, permanent resident. Yeah, it's not easy and required a lot, and I mean a lot of patience. I lost a lot of sleep while going through this. Obviously, having a global pandemic in the middle of it didn't help, and hopefully that's not something that is going to happen to you if you decide to go through this process. But all's well that ends well, right? one thing I want to say is that while I understand that my process took a long time, I was privileged enough to be waiting and doing all this from the comfort of my home in Toronto. And there are many others for whom the process is a lot more urgent, and I can empathize with how many hoops, bureaucratic hoops people have to jump through to immigrate into this country, into the United States, and in some cases escape some pretty dire conditions in whatever country they're coming from or whatever country they're passing through to get here. So while I and all those immigrants do not get a chance to vote in this 2024 election cycle, I would just hope that if you're watching this and you are an American citizen for whatever reason you're watching this and made it this far, please consider the issue of immigration reform from a human level, and understand that somewhere between building a massive wall or putting kids in cages or just having open borders with no restrictions at all, there is a humane process that both protects the citizens of this country and can continue the great tradition of immigration upon which this country was built. Thanks for watching. I know there's a lot, but if you have questions, drop them in the comments and I will try to do my best to answer them. Again, not legal advice, but thanks for watching. Bye.